Hi everybody, Culturist John here. The alt-right has been partially born out of frustration over PC ideology choking out scientific truth. We need policy based on science. Instead, what we get is this.
The racist, sexist, homophobic, xenophobic, Islamophobic.
Herein, I'll touch on 6 areas wherein the alt-right believes in science and the left just gives us ideology, hateful ideology. These areas are gender, homosexuality, race, climate change, family, and hierarchy. At the end, I'll give us a little bit of an angle from which we can push the alt-right.
Sexist, homophobic, xenophobic.
Gender differences exist. It's not just as the anti-science, PC, ideological left will tell you, a construct. Men are bigger, they have more testosterone, we're more competitive. There are lots of differences. Women do see emotions better, right? Science just bears this out, and evolutionarily that makes so much sense, right? The problem is not only that the PC ideological left denies this, but then they say, look, if there isn't total equality, it means that the white male is oppressing the women, right? The men are oppressing the women. No, it means that we're different, and that's beautiful, and it doesn't mean that we don't have cooperation. We do, but to constantly push that we must be equal or there's oppression and gender is one area is just divisive, and it's wrong. We need to have clear thinking about this, and this is an area where you have the least clear thinking, right? The left would rather see you dead than admit scientific fact, to admit obvious truth, right? They want to have an equal number of women firefighters. Really? That will lead to death. They want to have an equal number of women in the infantry. Again, we're bigger, we have more testosterone, we're bigger fighters. There are all kinds of problems that come out of having mixed gender and foxholes together for a long time. So again, we need to have clear scientific thinking on this, not PC ideology.
Sexist, homophobic, xenophobic.
The next area I want to talk about is family, okay? Look, evolutionarily, we developed to have bigger and bigger brains, and this is made in a longer gestation period, right? It takes 20 years for the human brain to develop. And the best environment for this is to have a mother and father in a stable relationship. The father is much of the provider, the woman is much of a nurturer. And to say that this entire thing is just some sort of plot to marginalize homosexuals and oppress women is really, really unscientific, right? Evolutionarily, this is where we need to be. And the proof is in that you get all kinds of maladaptions, right? People don't succeed, they have more criminality if they're raised by single mothers. So this whole framing, the idea that family is heteronormative, it's hateful, is putting PC in front of what we see as basic scientific truth.
Racist, sexist, homophobic.
This is another area where the left puts ideology so far ahead of science, it's ridiculous, it's frustrating, it fuels the alt-right. The left tells you if you don't believe that homosexuality is 100% genetic, you are a hater, you're a homophobe. This is complete nonsense. In fact, a recent study of identical twins found that when one twin was gay, only 20% of the second twins were gay. And these twins share 100% of their genes. In fact, the idea that it's 100% genetic shows how little the left knows about science, right? Any complex phenotype, any complex outcome of our genetics is a combination of genetics and environment. So the environment matters. As a culturist, we know this. We need to make policy that is aware of this. If you say that if we don't have gay marriage in every state, if you don't agree with that, you're a homophobe, you are denying that we are actually mutable, right? We're plastic. We are. And if you're going to have gay marriage, it will have an effect. We have a federal republic almost for that very reason, right? We can compare outcomes and see what happens, and then we can decide what kind of outcomes we want. Gay marriage, males are more promiscuous. So if you're going to have gay marriage, it's going to be a different kind of marriage. You maybe have to have different sort of standards for gay marriage. This is, again, scientific. It doesn't mean I'm a hater. It doesn't mean I want to push gays off buildings. It doesn't mean I'm a homophobe, right? If you're going to have gay nightclubs on every corner, if you're going to have gay promotion clubs in schools and on colleges, again, it will have an effect in not only the rate of homosexuality, but the way it's expressed. We need to be able to talk about this. Why? Because there is a social, there's a stake for society in this game, right? Promiscuity, early promiscuity, is not a good setup. It's a negative indicator for long-term monogamous heterosexual relationships in which children are raised. We need to be able to talk about this. Just saying, you're a hater, if you don't believe it's 100% genetic, you're a homophobe. This is not how science works. The alt-right is fueled by this just sort of outrageous ignorance of how science works, and we need to fight it. The alt-right needs to fight it.
Homophobic, racist, sexist, homophobic.
IQ differences are real. Race is not just a construct. Everything we know about evolution teaches us this. We emerged from Africa, what, 70,000 years ago? Are you really saying that there's been no evolution since then? No, we know we get into cultural niches, we have different pressures, we develop differently. And IQ tests, all of them are the same, they're conclusive. IQs are different. The left's response to this is not to say, science. It's to say, you're a hater, you're a racist, you're KKK, you're genocidal, you're a white supremacist. Look, that does not help, right? This fuels what I think are some of the worst tendencies in the alt-right, frankly. But we need to be able to talk about this, right? Most of us realize that people of different colors make great patriots, right? Many are hardworking citizens. Trump most assuredly believes minorities can make great citizens, and he may still be an alt-right leaning race realist, yet it doesn't mean that we're racist and that we hate all black people and we want them to die, right? But we need to be able to talk about criminal propensity. We need to be able to talk about IQ. We need to be able to talk about differences in achievement. You can't just say we're haters all the time. And look, I'm a culturist, right? I'm not a racist. I'm a culturist. I think that evolution, I know that evolution has made us cultural animals, and we get more bang for our buck talking about culture than race. We can't change our skin color, we can change our culture, and we can make all of us better people. But if we can't talk about this at all, if every time it's like, you're a hater, we will get nowhere. And then it gets worse, right? Because the ideological left first announces science, and then they say, if there's any differences in achievement, economic or educational achievement, in skill sets, in jobs, that means that there's been white oppression. Now, you guys are the racist. And what that does is it not only fuels the alt-right, the sort of disconnect between what we see and reality, it fuels the worst aspects in the alt-right. And yes, there are some white nationalists, white supremacists, alt-right people, but I think that's a minimum, and you blow that out of proportion. And why? Because you want to shut down discussion. If the alt-right is to be enlightened, we need you to be enlightened. You need to stop saying you're a racist every time you mention that there are differences in skill sets and IQ. Evolution is real. Science is real. Race is real.
Sexist, homophobic.
I want to talk about the alt-right's vision of humanity. Again, there's so much emerging in the science of man in terms of knowing about evolutionary psychology, sociobiology, neuroanthropology, cultural neuroscience, etc. But the left just wants to ignore all this. So one area is equality, this sort of communist egalitarian push. We must all be equal comes out of the left. No, hierarchy pervades mammalian species. It pervades us. We have groups. We're very much like the chimpanzees. We have borders. This sort of globalist thing is not scientifically sound. And that's, again, creates a lot of resentment because, if you're not equal, you're oppressing. If there's no equality, there's oppression by white people. This creates frustration, it creates defensiveness, it creates anger. And if you follow its path, you end up with a society that has class warfare and a society that doesn't achieve. And then ultimately, even poor people don't get out of poverty as quickly as they should. But more importantly, right, Marxism killed millions of people based on the idea that we must all be equal. And in even history that has thrown out the window, truth, fact, out the window, because we have this ideology of equality. We've got to be able to talk about science, about the naturalness of conflict, the naturalness of competition in school, the naturalness of hierarchy.
Racist, sexist, homophobic.
It's important that we talk about climate change because this is the very stick, right, that the left uses to beat the right and say, you are not scientific. When Hillary Clinton accepted the Democratic nomination for president, this is what she said.
I believe in science.
The implication is that we are not scientific. And look, a 2016 survey of meteorologists found that 29%, only 29%, agreed with the statement that climate change has been caused, quote unquote, largely or entirely by human activity, end quote. So are all these people anti-science? If you're going to take a hypothesis that's debating and say, if you don't believe in it, that's not scientific, you don't believe in science, shows that you don't understand how science works. The left is again putting PC ideology in front of science. It's fueling frustration, it's making people mad, and we want a little bit of truth. This is partially where the alt-right comes from.
Is homophobic, xenophobic.
So we've looked at these 6 areas: gender, homosexuality, race, the family, hierarchy, even climate change. And now I want to give some advice to the alt-right. There's a common understanding there. Common sense says that the left is scientific, right? They're progressive. And the right is full of these troglodytes. They're racist, they're homophobic, they're unenlightened. They're just evangelicals. They hate... Look, okay, we do have more evangelicals on our side. But evangelicals... truth and the truth that the scientific that I've been talking about really mesh together, right? There's no conflict between evangelical values and wanting to have a family. There's no conflict between evangelical values and wanting to acknowledge gender differences. But here's the big point, right? We've got to flip that narrative. We actually are the scientific people. The right, the alt-right are very scientific. We have a modern, up-to-date understanding of race, of gender, of hierarchy, of status dynamics, of many things. And the left just pushes ideology, ideology, ideology. So we need to put biological truth in front of PC ideology. We need to switch the narrative where the right is troglodyte, evangelical. We need to understand that the right is the scientific movement. The left is anti-science, and it's dangerous. If we do that, we can win the culture wars. This has been John Press. Culture's John. Thanks for listening. Bye.